pass of time. Though there was something that I left behind. When I leave this world, I leave no regrets. There's something to remember, so they won't forget I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I did, I've done everything that I wanted. It was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I wanna say I lived each day until I die. I know that I put something in somebody's life. The hearts that I touch will be the proof that I live. If this world remember, and this world will see, I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I did, I've done everything that I wanted. It was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I did, I've done everything that I wanted. It was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I just want them to know that I gave my all, did my best, brought someone some happiness. Love this world little better just because I was here. I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I did, I've done everything that I wanted. It was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I did, I've done, I was here. I did, I've done, I was here. I've done, I was here. I did, I've done, I was here.
Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Interbrand and Daily FT International Women's Day 2021, Leading in Extraordinary Times. I would like to invite Nistar Kasim, the editor of the Daily Financial Times, and Anusha David, the chairman of Headlines Public Relations and partner at Interbrand Sri Lanka, to deliver the welcome address. Please give them a warm welcome.
Good evening, everyone. This is a short welcome, but we'll have a formal welcome later on. We are going to have a great evening of extraordinary and inspiring women, both as speakers and panelists, but more importantly, in the audience. And we hope it will be an interactive evening in addition to all the fun and good food. Anusha, over to you.
Thank you, Nishta. Thank you all you wonderful people for gracing today's event and being here. I hope this is the first of many events now that COVID hopefully is more or less a thing of the past. On behalf of Interbrand, whom we represent here in Sri Lanka, it's wonderful to have all of you here with us. We are living indeed in extraordinary times. As you know, this is the theme of today's evening. And maybe I'm a little prejudiced, but I feel very strongly, and I think all the women here today echo my sentiments, that we are the backbone of society. We multitask, we work, we run the house, we look after innumerable things in the given course of any day. And my fervent hope is that in the very near future, there really will not be a need for an International Women's Day or a day of any kind, because every day is one where we celebrate gender equity and equality amongst all peoples, where everyone, irrespective of their sex, their race, their religion, their creed, is honored and respected. So once again, thank you for being with us. A very warm welcome to all of you. And on behalf of Interbrand, I'm delighted to have all of you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have Mr. Ashish Mishra, the head of Interbrand India, who will address us.
Thank you. Hello all. Most iconic characters of the country, the common man. Through the common man character, some of the most defining social, cultural, and political statements have been made every day for an astounding of over half a century. So, the strong and the independent, curious woman accosted R.K. Lakshman and said, "Sir, I love your thoughts, your satire. And like all Indians, I too have grown wiser over the years reading and relishing your daily columns. But there's one question that I've always had. Why did you create a common man? Why not a common woman?" The legend R.K. Lakshman smiled back and said, "I couldn't have. Simply because there are no common women. They're all special. None of them are common, they're all special. So welcome to all you special and wondrous women of Sri Lanka. Heartfelt gratitude to our fellow speakers, partners, and friends for pulling up this amazing congregation, which in times like these around the world feels like a miracle, nothing short of a miracle, really. So just having a physical congregation of this nature itself is so delightful, and thank you for that. Well, it's one of the most unusual times we're living in, like Anusha and Nisha mentioned in the opening. There is a change in the nature of change. And it's not that change is something new. We've been talking about change for a while. We've spoken about the VUCA world and stuff, but the change that we're witnessing now is different, and it's different because it's lost its linearity. It's pervasive. It's kaleidoscopic change that we're witnessing. And what does this kind of a kaleidoscopic change do? Well, on the face of it, it creates an all-engulfing crisis. And if we go deeper, if we go behind the face, what you might see is an overdue catharsis, perhaps an implosion of various degenerative pursuits that we've been having for decades, and possibly an evolution towards existential issues like diversity, equity, inclusion, work-life balance, health, climate change, or put simply, humans, human living, and humanity. And that can't be bad if we are evolving towards that. And it just might seem a bit odd or even insensitive to say that, but if we step back from the immediacy of the current crisis and place it in a broader context, we may find that we're possibly navigating the route to a new renaissance. And it's easy to see why people do not see the current times like that. It's simply because we're living in the middle of absolute anxiety. We're swinging between fear and hope, and large part of our lives is fraught with the anxiety that's defining our times, defining our lives today, and it is a situation, these are times that need a new kind of leadership, a courageous leadership, leadership that is not the conventional one, not the top down, formal, masculine, title led, authoritative, driven by wealth and power. It's a different kind of leadership that the world demands, really. And that's where women leaders are increasingly becoming anchor points for ushering in the new renaissance. And in particular, there are these five strengths that stand out, which is why we really believe it devolves upon women to lead the world into this new renaissance. The first one really is about how women have the authenticity. They're naturally real. They're unpretentious. Therefore, when they create product, services, tools, or processes, they actually solve problems. They're continually in real touch with their customers and constituents' lives. The second strength that really fits well with what's warranted in these times is women are naturally purposive. They have a clarity, they have a sense of purpose. They answer the question of why am I here a lot more naturally, and that kind of purposeful North Star is the focus of creating a positive impact in the world. The third bit is that we all know of the intuition that the gender has, and they are intuitively meaningful because there is a sensitivity, there is a higher emotive strength, there is a capability of creating more meaningful experiences, which is what matters a lot more today. They know how to lead with their heart, not just with their head. And there are a whole lot of small acts that follow, which is vulnerability, gratitude, empathy, things that are really core to leadership of new times. Fourth, women leaders engage a lot better. And they're natural at fostering dialogue. They look beyond their own genius. They extract and extend the genius of others, which is why they're able to show why what they do matters to the colleagues, to constituents, to the rest of the world. And lastly, women leaders are capable and they're making brave and bold moves. And who makes brave and bold moves? It's only those who are secure and self-aware, who are unpretentious, who know who they are and where they're going. Only they have the confidence to make bold moves today. And women leaders have the courage, which is why they'll find it easier to intercept the future, not just flow with it. Take decisive action, which creates real impact, makes real difference. And the world looks up to you and awaits the unfolding of the new era led by all of you amazing women. And I look forward to that as well. And thank you.
Without further ado, we now have Miss Rebecca Robbins, the Global Chief Learning and Culture Officer at Interbrand, and she will be addressing us now.
Thank you so much, everyone, and good evening to you all. It's absolutely a true pleasure and inspiration to be here. It's also very special for us, as I sit here in the UK, to be part of an in-person event. This experience very much has become extraordinary for us, as we are already a few weeks away from being able to convene in such a moment of conversation and celebration as you are. And per Ashish, a very much a heartfelt thank you to you all. In a world where we have had to be more isolated and remote, the magic of being human is really about what we do together and the change that we can make together. And as you said, Ashish, the Renaissance was very much about art and science coming together as never before. And I would say that the new Renaissance is very much about people, about humanity coming together as never before. And as I get started into today's discussion, I just close with a point that Anusha so eloquently made, that we will have succeeded ultimately when International Women's Day does not exist anymore. So a powerful point for us all to keep in mind. So as we lead through extraordinary times, and as we think about what that really means, there are a lot of things that I could talk about today. And my starting point is really the prefix extra in extraordinary, which when we really think about what that means, it means outside, it means about beyond. And in extraordinary times throughout history, we have seen examples of creativity within constraint. We have seen examples of innovation. And one of the most universally loved brands in the world, let's remember, was actually born in a depression. That brand is Lego. So a reminder as we think about brands and the power of creativity through these extraordinary times. So my mission surely in these minutes that we have together is to try and inspire all of us to go beyond in some way, to do something extra, to do something exceptional in the everyday, to inspire our thinking, to inspire our ambitions, and crucially, our actions. And so with that in mind, I wanted humbly to share with you inspiration from two stories. One comes from one of the leading brands in our Best Global Brand study, and one from a more personal perspective. Let's begin with a benchmark case study from a brand that operates within the world of the extraordinary, a brand that operates by setting its own rules and standards. Gucci, as you will all know, is one of the most valuable brands in the world, as benchmarked by many studies, including our own Best Global Brand study. As you know, we're known for valuing the most valuable brands in the world. And we do a lot of work with the brands in the space of luxury and culture. What's been very telling, however, are the commitments that you may not be aware of that they have been making on the inside of their brand with their people that have been driving a lot of that value and business success. It's important also to reflect on the years leading up to the crisis, where the luxury industry was very much outperforming every other sector in our study. A big part of that success has been the ability of those brands to connect to the cultural zeitgeist. While luxury is based on the premise, as we know, of things that are inherently exclusive, these brands have been establishing themselves as ever more inclusive, accessible to new audiences and to new generations. And we know from the data that we have over 2 decades of valuing these brands, that great brands truly grow strong from within. They grow strong from the strength of their people, from the strength of their culture, as Ashish was talking about at the beginning. And a number of the most significant moves in the recent years have been in connecting culture on the inside. Brands that have understood the importance of leading with empathy and with agility. Let's look at Dior. They have an amazing program, Women at Dior. They are a brand under the creative leadership of a phenomenally inspiring leader who is carrying forward the DNA of the brand in a way that's giving new voice and new voices to that brand. We think about Cartier and the Women's Initiative and their entrepreneur program. We think about Prada adopting a fascinating co-leadership model, quite unprecedented in the industry. But one of the most significant moves has been that of Gucci. We have seen what the moves have done for its exponential increase in brand value, the fastest growing luxury brand in the past years. And a lot of that is what they've been doing with their people and with their culture. Specifically though, with rising generations of talent in their organization, which is what inspires and fascinates me. And one of the things that they have done, it's quite new within the world of business and brands, but it already is taking off quite quickly, which is investing in next generation boards. They invested in their own shadow board, as they call it, a board of under 30s, as one of the moves that really have propelled them forward. These are millennials that the CEO has met with on a regular basis to stay close to what's on their minds and to keep them ahead of others. If you were to Google today the word shadow board, you would probably come up with a Harvard Business Review article and others showing growing evidence of the value of this type of approach. And why is that important? Well, we know that brands with strong cultures were better placed going into this past crisis, this past year. If you were a luxury brand, you were heavily affected by what's happened. You had to pivot your fashion shows. You had to really rethink your markets when retail was closed for much of last year. And they were one of the brands really who continued to experiment and innovate through that past year. And that has been a lot of testament to their investment in their people and their culture. So here we have, to start us off, a lesson from a brand that has set standards in leadership and new models of leadership. And I promised you a second story based on this theme. And if you were listening to some of the videos at the beginning, you will have heard some of the following language about being brave in everything that we do at Interbrand, about creativity, taking courage. And 1 year ago, we made a commitment to investing in our culture, to our rising talent, and amazing women in our business by setting up our own next generation board. And why was that significant? Well, if we go back to the origins of Interbrand, we were founded in 1974, and over that time, we have been the leader in the world of brand consultancy. We have worked with some of the most iconic brands in the world to shape their future. We've innovated, we've pioneered methodologies for valuing brands, and we've shaped a lot of the language and brands that we use today. But in almost half a decade of being in business, we've been reflecting on what are the game-changing moves that we have made as a brand on the inside. And so what we did over a year ago was to launch our own next generation board of rising leaders. And that was important because we are advising the brand leaders in the world. So surely it is incumbent upon us to be looking constantly ahead. And this really was a tangible commitment to next generation talent, to investing in the future of leadership, and to help us as a business future forecast. I'll share a little bit of the story in just a couple of minutes around the process, because what we did was opened up applications to this board across our entire global network. There were very few criteria. As a next generation board, there was an age criterion, but apart from that, open was a key imperative of this process. We wanted this to be inclusive and fully accessible for people to either apply or to be nominated. And it was a process really that ignited imaginations across our business. And after intense deliberations, we selected 10 of our rising talent across Interbrand, and a truly global collective based across Tokyo, Seoul, Milan, Madrid, Cologne, London, and New York. 6 women and 4 men. And that's very significant when we think about the representation of women in leadership positions. In the UK, I'll share an anecdote with you. As I sit here today, there are still more CEOs in the FTSE 500 named Peter than there are women CEOs. And again, as we think about gender representation and how that has been shifting from one market to another, there is still a lot of work for us to do. And to remind ourselves of the context of extraordinary times, the timing of today is significant. March marks the 1-year anniversary of this next generation board at Interbrand. The first board meeting happened during lockdown. It's a group of people who have never in fact met in person, but they have operated throughout as a remote team, growing together, becoming a highly successful collaborative of young people. And that really was extraordinary when we really think about that word, how they work together as a team, and what they have done in that time. And to Ashish's point, he mentioned the word authentic at the very, very beginning, and I couldn't agree more. Having an authentic representation is absolutely crucial. We counsel our clients to do this. And again, we counsel ourselves to do this. 2020 was indeed a year that none of us could have predicted. And we asked our board what it was like to be on this board during this time. And they said, it's enabled us to do better work. It's enabled us to understand each other better. It's really moved ourselves forward, both as individuals, themselves as a collective, and indeed us as a brand. And I believe that collaboration and co-creation really are the defining words of a new decade. What moves things forward is what we make happen together. And they were given the responsibility of undertaking one of the most important things in our business, actually developing our purpose and ambition as a brand, and inspiring us in terms of what will motivate us and our people and future people to the most important ambitions and achievements over the next 5 years. We also set up two-way mentoring between our next generation board members and ourselves. Again, this is very important for us in terms of how we foster belief, empathy, and trust in future leadership. And at the moment, the Next Generation Board is looking at what the wider representation and elevation of next generation voices and diverse talent should be within and across our business. So a very exciting time for us all as we reflect on the past year and what extraordinary leadership has meant. So as I close with just a few words as we go into the next stage of the conversation today, I would say creating a next generation board is certainly a tangible commitment that you can make happen. I hope it's giving you a little bit of an insight in terms of what is possible and how companies are looking now to develop leadership in new ways. For us, also, we were in a strong position to do so. We had already invested a lot in our people and our culture. You will have heard in the videos at the beginning these values that we live to every day: leading with love, being brave, speaking up, and making it happen. We have the empathy and trust of a culture that leads with love. We know what it means to be a culture empowered to speak up. They tell the story really of what is so important and relevant to our journey as a business, and powerful, I think, for us all today to think about how important language is as a container for change and a container for so much of what we're talking about. The words we choose, the words we use, the words that we share and that we champion on behalf of each other. And finally, as we sit here today, and I think about these 10 people and who they are and what they represent for each other and for us and for other people, I'd like just to take a moment to think about someone who has had an influential role in your journey. Think about somebody who lent in and who helped you, who spent time to teach you something. Think about a woman for whom you could do something to make a difference. If over the hundreds of us here today made one positive nudge towards one person, think about the cascade effect that would have. Thank you so much to you all for listening. And most importantly, we would love to know about what's on your minds and to hear some of the work that you've been doing in your businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing that valuable insight. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Rebecca Robbins. I would now like to invite Nikki Gomez, the founder of Maximize Me, who will moderate a question and answer session.
Good evening, everyone. We'd love to hear your questions posed to Rebecca. The waiters are around with microphones, so please just wave at them and grab a mic and ask a question. Anyone like to start? Can we have Rebecca back up on the screen? Hi, Rebecca. Whilst everyone is enjoying the magic of being human and coming together again after many, many months, let me kick off by asking a question. So you were talking about the shadow board, which is basically harnessing the hive mind of young people who work in different areas, offering a diverse opinion and perspective. And this has worked really well for Gucci and other brands. Could you tell us a little bit more about how these shadows boards have been formalized and what is their extent of the decision-making authority?
That's a wonderful question, and I think also primarily because they are still quite nascent as a concept. Again, if you go back to this article written by Harvard Business Review a few years ago, it's been one where a lot of businesses have seen this actually as more than a risk than an opportunity, and I would argue that actually it's probably more of a risk not to consider what you are doing investing in your next generation talent. Firstly, we established them as a collective in and of themselves. I think it's important when you do this is the very first time we've done it for ourselves, is to give them time to form, to norm as a collective themselves, to give them a clear remit in terms of what they would be working on with us over the first few months, and then what that would look like as we are co-creating it with them and getting their influence and their information around what is most important to them. So we haven't really put too much pressure in terms of what their mandate is on the first sort of 6 months of them working with us. So we are open together in leadership meetings. We talk about things that are very much important to us as a business and what's driving us forward. But we also wanted to give them the space to be creators themselves, and so tasking them with the opportunity to develop our own purpose and ambition as a business was something that I think, you know, many brands might feel, again, it's attached to a lot of risk, but for us, again, because we've done a lot of work on our own culture and our own values, this culture that leads with love, that is brave, and is about making things happen, it very much felt right and strong for us to really move forward with this board quite quickly in the way that we did.
Thank you. Yes, I was reading about Gucci's virtual sneakers that are selling, which I would imagine might have come out of a shadow board's idea.
It's very interesting. I think you're so right around what's testament in the market is always testament to what's going on the inside of the brand. And, you know, certainly as we know, luxury brands, which were outperforming any other industry before the crisis hit, they obviously all took a hit in different ways, but certainly leaders such as Gucci have been more, you know, I think very much more mitigated by the fact that the strength of their culture internally allowed them very much, they were very well placed in terms of a culture of experimentation and creativity and innovation. And as a brand also, they were very vocal about, you know, where they wouldn't necessarily fall into the continuous fashion cycle of fashion shows, and where they did things their own way, where they broke rules, but allowed for much more creativity, and also then allowing them to be, you know, effectively a brand that is led by and inspired by millennials, for millennials, as they were looking to reach new generations, and that's been a very important part of their strategy.
Absolutely. There's a question over there. The lady in pink.
As a female leader and a brand in your own right, what has been the most significant barrier in your career?
Let me just make sure I've heard that correctly. The most significant barrier in my career, was that the question? That's just so I'm clear.
Yes, correct. As a female leader, what has been the biggest barrier in your career?
That's a great great question. Thank you. It's interesting. I was speaking with our Madrid team this week, actually, as we've been having conversations around our global network on gender equality. And one of the things that they asked me was, what did you face any barriers early on? And I remember actually when I was very young, I think it was in my first year as being a brand consultant, being in a meeting with clients in the north of England. It was for a very big industrial client that we were working with. And the feeling that I had actually as a very young woman, actually probably at the time, looking younger than my age, and that sense of holding a meeting room and holding that credibility when they're clearly you could sense that sense of there's a younger woman, a woman. What can she possibly know potentially about all of the things that we have with our industry? And yet, what I counselled the young team I was talking to in Madrid was that what I did know was my world as brand consultant. I did know my expertise as applied to the industry, and the rest obviously in terms of the stories follow. But it's an important moment I think for us all as we encounter. There might be small meetings along the way or small occasions, but I've often held that meeting in my head around, we will all encounter barriers in different shapes and forms in our lives, but I think it's important to look at what really is the barrier, what does it constitute, and then to stay strong and maintain the confidence in who you are and what you know to carry that forward. And also I think to continue to tell these stories of what barriers we have every day, be they large, be they small, and also to preempt barriers, I would say. And the Next Generation Board was something that there was no mandate, there was no imperative, other than that I'd had this on my mind for a while, and I saw really the real potential of what this could mean for those people and for our business particularly. I would love to see our Horizon Board, as it's called, here in 10, 15, 20 years' time, shaping next generations of interbranders around the world. So I also like to think about what barriers might come in the future and how can we tear those down before they even start.
I think this, ladies and gentlemen, is the Nangi syndrome that we see sometimes here in Sri Lanka as well. Yes, there's a question there.
Hi. When nurturing the next generation to take over, what are the biggest problems we have with this generation and the next generation? What are the problems we face when preparing them for leadership?
I love that question. First of all, one of the things that I was quite keen to do early on was set up this two-way mentoring. So we have mentoring matches for every member of our Next Generation Board with their chosen leaders across the business. So I said to them, who would you like to be matched with? And it's been wonderful because mentoring at its best, in my view, is it's a two-way conversation where we learn from each other, because that already really starts to set a different type of tone for how we learn from each other across generations, because you're absolutely right. This is not easy. This is not easy, and some of these conversations are not easy. But really, as ever, that's where the real work begins. That's how you affect change. And as I said at the very beginning, one of the only constraints in the applications for the Next Generation Board were the context of age, because we wanted to have that gap. We wanted to know what the difference was. We wanted to know what's on their minds and how they would seek to inform and influence us. And I was so thrilled just 2 weeks ago. There was an event that I was invited to speak at in the art world in London, and it was entitled, What Can the Art World and Museums Learn from Interbrand's Next Generation Board? And for me, that was testament to the success that we had in a short space of time, in a year of isolation, remote working, again, where these 10 people had never met before, they've still not met. They had achieved so much already to get to that point where we were being talked about in that way. And crucially, when I say we, as in the Next Generation Board, and the other punchline to that story is that 2 of them were with me on that panel. So when I sort of close now with my call to action to today, it's very much around, let's make sure that we are also bringing those voices with us wherever we can, in terms of platforms to give them a voice and to enable others to hear from them. So, my view of this co-creation and collaboration model is very much us side by side with each other. And to your point, you're so right again, it's not going to be out without its challenges in those conversations, but That's the beauty of, I think, creative bravery and what really we choose to challenge when we think about the phrase choose to challenge in the context of gender equality this month, but choose to challenge and really change. And it's not going to happen overnight, it's not going to happen instantly. It does take time, and it also takes time to invest in this change. It's one of the things where I've committed to personally. I operate effectively as a semi-chair coach role with this collective of 10 people, and I am beyond proud and humbled and inspired to do that because of what we're really looking to build here at a much longer term basis. That's a great question though, thank you for it.
Okay, we have another question over there.
Rebecca, what mindset does society have for women? How would you brand the society?
Oh, I wonder, can you build a little bit more on that question?
What I wanted to know is what mindset does society have for women and how would you brand the society?
Is there a little bit more detail when you talk about what mindset does society have for women? I'd love just to hear maybe...
Like what they think about women, on their abilities and what kind of impression they have and how that impacts the society.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful to have the further detail. It's a big question, thank you. I would say also that sitting within a global company, and again this collective of 10 people in our business represents truly who we are as a global business. You know, the individual society is related to different cultures. We were doing another event just this week, looking at what the stats are around gender pay gap from one country to another. And if you can imagine that as a global brand, that's quite interesting and challenging, not just for us, but for so many businesses in terms of what gender equality looks like in the UK and the conversations that are happening, in terms of what gender equality looks like in Japan and the conversations that are happening there. You know, there's quite a tragic and very moving story that we are all caught up with in the UK at the moment, which is about the tragic death and murder of a young professional. As you might have seen, there are stories all over the world about what is happening on individual levels and what that means in society to collective levels. It's happening in every country, in the same way, sometimes in different ways. So I think absolutely your point relates to so much that is, you know, shared and common as a language in terms of what we're dealing with. At the same time, there are things that are going on that are very individual to our societies and to cultures. But at a macro level, and I suppose I would use Ashish's metaphor at the beginning, I love his reference to this framework of a new renaissance somehow, and I do think this notion of a common language that we have in that, you know, if art and science back in the original Renaissance were coming together in this way as never before, really we have to think the mindset of society now needs to be about people coming together in new ways. And again, to the other lady's point in the audience, that's not easy either, because it requires shared language that we don't necessarily have. You know, how many times do these conversations come unstuck, or they're not even heard, or people are silent because they don't have the common language to start to address it. And I think something that we talk a lot about at Interbrand is also being kind to each other in that process, because those conversations may not be easy, but certainly we need allyship from men as much as we do need these conversations between us as women. So that very much is on my mind around, you know, how much more collaborative and co-creative we can be in moving society forward. But it's a beautiful question, and I feel almost sets us up for an entire next conference perhaps that we could have. So thank you for it, and I hope it's answered some of your questions. As I say, it's a very big one, so thank you very much.
Yeah, very insightful answer. We've got time for one last question. Who would be asking that one? Oh, over here, waiter, thank you.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Hi. It's nice to speak to you as a brand consultant. I would like to know what is the interesting outcome you faced when you really started to do a shadow board or next generation board? Any interesting outcome that you really put in so much effort, and any story or...
I'd love to tell you a couple of stories, and thank you. It's a beautiful question. Thank you so much for listening tonight. It's heartwarming to know that this conversation is being had, and thank you for taking it on. I will tell you one story at the very beginning, which was about the application process, which tells you a lot, I think, about our culture to start with and how it's been evolving and growing stronger. With the application process that we have, as I mentioned at the beginning, I very much was vehement and adamant that this was open. We wanted this to be open to quiet voices, to loud voices, to people from every one of our offices across the network. And in that process, somebody from one of the offices, a young man, got in touch with me and said, I know there are applications from other people in my office for this Horizon board. And he said, you know, if they apply, and if you believe that you want to accept them, please don't accept me. And I just have to tell you that story because I think it's just such an inspiring moment of male allyship and for standing back to allow somebody else to go forward into an opportunity. And to that day, it still makes me quite emotional because I think it's just so wonderful and inspiring in terms of the moves that we can all make. And I think, second of all, in terms of the outcomes, we asked them to develop our purpose as a business. What's our purpose statement that will drive us forward? Now, Microsoft, at a similar time, our CEO was having a conversation with Microsoft and learning about how they had developed Microsoft's purpose, which was with their boardroom, their executive leadership team. And they don't have a next generation board per se, as I think is so far as I'm aware. And he was telling them how we were doing it with our next generation board, and it was a really refreshing conversation in terms of what that meant. So they've already achieved that. That's a 5-year statement and ambition that is true to us as a business and that will carry on for so many, and so it will have impact for our clients, for prospective clients, and future talent, which I think is so inspiring. And at the moment, they're working on a number of things, not all of which I can reveal to you, but they only have 6 months now on their tenure. Another thing that I was looking at was how long do we give them this responsibility alongside their day jobs, if you will. And so they culminate in September, and we're working with them now to look at, you know, the final impact and influence that they are having on an ongoing basis around next generation voices and the events that we run and the influence that we have both within the organization and outside with external partners. But we're also already talking to them about what will their legacy be, how will their roles have changed. And by the way, I can share with you also that actually almost all of them have already been promoted, which I think again is testament to so much of what they've been achieving above and beyond. So I suppose my last word is, you know, extraordinary times, but also give rise to extraordinary people.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's all we have time for questions. Thank you to the audience and everyone who participated. Rebecca, we hope that we've lightened your Sunday in lockdown in London and that it doesn't go on too much longer. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you all. Thank you so much. So inspiring what you're doing. So thank you so much for being together tonight. Wishing you a lovely rest of your evening.
We now have our chief guest, Dr. Swati Piramal, the Vice Chairperson of Piramal Enterprises, who will address us. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, Anusha, for inviting me this evening, calling all the way from India to Sri Lanka. And I want to give a shout out to many of my group employees who work in the glass business, a business called Ceylon Glass, and they're located near Colombo. So we have a very long standing partnership with Sri Lanka. Maya Angelou was an American poet, memorist, and civil rights activist. She was a winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the Grammy Award. And she wrote a poem called Phenomenal Woman. Inspired by Maya's poem, I've titled my talk, Leading in Extraordinary Times, The Phenomenal Woman. The poem has simple lyrics, simple words that creates the voice of the poet, a phenomenal woman. Pretty woman, wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman. Perhaps the poet is trying to say that a woman's secret, her agency, is not in her shape, is not in her beauty, but what she can embrace and envelop. She is an autonomous, self delighting, self directed woman, the image of Mother Earth, and her stride is of confidence, and her secret is her inner soul. She has a strong poetic voice, and the woman carries herself with grace and equanimity in spite of turbulence. It's not arrogance, but self confidence to lead in tough times. Today, I want to touch on a few points. One, that in tough times rarely last, tough people do. Second, using the ancient values, Gyan, Karma, Bhakti in Sanskrit, or knowledge, action, and compassion, is a formula in this crisis that I have used, and everyone can make a difference. And lastly, that life is like a jigsaw puzzle and that problems can be solved. Going back in time nearly 40 years ago, I was a young medical doctor and experiencing the first carefree years of married life. I was not to know that tragic events would bring terrible consequences both at work and at home. My story began in the 1980s, where the Piramal family ran a century-old textile mills situated in the heart of Mumbai. Those were tough times. A mill strike left a 100-year-old family nearly bankrupt. And then there were sudden deaths of my father-in-law and brother-in-law. At 29, my husband was the chairman of the group and a family severely hurt by tragedy. Everyone round us said we couldn't manage this catastrophe. But a line in a book gave some hope. It said, tough times rarely last, but tough people do. Extraordinary times require tough people. Fast forward to today. Amidst the global pandemic, the world is facing an unprecedented health, moral, financial, and leadership crisis. In India today, like in Sri Lanka, there's a second surge and growing rapidly. In the beginning of the pandemic, I wondered what we could do to battle against COVID-19. It reminded me of a story. Some 3,000 years ago, there was a young prince called Ram. To find Sita, who had been kidnapped by the demon Ravan, Ram traversed many forests and enlisted the help of a vast army of apes and bears. Huge boulders were pushed into the sea to construct the bridge. On the shore, a group of squirrels wanted to help Ram in his mighty quest. They scurried around and put small pebbles into the sea. The big apes made fun of this tiny effort. Lord Ram heard this derisive laughter and said, the little pebbles make the boulder stable. So everyone, even a small action, can make a difference. The poet Iqbal said to the eagle, "O eagle, do not fear the oncoming storm. It comes to make you soar high above winds." During the pandemic, in one of the most severe lockdowns in India, more than 1 million people in Mumbai were living in crowded slums, faced severe hunger. To combat starvation, getting cooked meals into slums, a huge number of us, mostly philanthropists, public-private partnerships came together to serve 10 million cooked meals. A famine was averted in Mumbai meal by meal, just like the little pebbles. The squirrels gathered and made a huge difference. Here is another ancient story. In an epic war between the Pandavas and Kauravas, Lord Krishna gave his advice to Prince Arjuna on managing the battlefield of life. The formula, he said, is this: Jnana, knowledge, plus karma, action, plus bhakti, compassion, is equal to dhriti, impact. Let's take Jnana, the pursuit of knowledge and the worship of Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Knowledge can be learned and acquired. When I became the president of the Apex Chamber of Commerce, I really didn't know many subjects. I'm a trained doctor, but I didn't know so much about the economy, about nuclear energy, all kinds of things. I would make sure I read 1,000 pages before every meeting. This gift of reading and the love for science was a gift of my father for his daughter. Feel the need to make a difference, a deep compassion, not just for one, not just for many, but a huge number of people. And I think where I trained in public health is a science of affecting many people's lives improving the quality of life, and removing the burden of disease. Karma or action is critical at the time of the pandemic. And our mobile vans, which were trained to help mothers and children, were retrained to help families struck by COVID. We moved teams to helplines and answered questions and helped with contact tracing. Our clean water service was cited as an essential service and cleaned nearly 80 million liters of water in 3 months. Teams acted virtually and quickly to turn ideas into action. The last one, bhakti or compassion, an idea from our education arm of the Piramal Foundation, quickly evolved into adoption by regional governments. It was public health innovation to reach what we call the poorest and the most backward districts in India. There are no hospitals here or even a single ventilator, no running water. People wash their hands in soil rather than soap. Here, the most vulnerable were the elderly. In these rural areas, the COVID infection came after the urban areas, but when it did, it was like a tidal wave. India is very well served in telecom lines, training 100,000 volunteers in a matter of days and pairing that with government's data. We enabled nearly 200,000 house calls, made more than 1.6 million phone calls to find elderly people in need. And we quickly called it Nani, Nana, or Dadi, Dada Protection Force. The young people called, gave information, helped get medicines, pensions, or food where it was needed. No one had called the elderly before. They were left alone, frightened, fearful, and locked down. This simple idea was replicated in 150 aspirational districts where 40 million people live. It was compassion, bhakti at scale. The feelings expressed by the elderly on the ground were of a profound relief. Young voices reaching out to them, care and compassion, everything you do. The idea of seva, the idea of a loving service is so powerful that it touches someone and makes a huge impact. You can gain from giving energy and compassion. The energy has a power to heal. The Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh tells a story of the Bodhisattva whose name was Kshitigarbha. His idea was to go where there is suffering. Today, many people, doctors and nurses are doing that. They are not afraid of suffering. If you want to do something with your life to be useful and meaningful, then you must make a vow to help people who suffer. Life is like a jigsaw puzzle. We all have problems. Gaur Gopal Das, a monk who teaches us the great epic, said, I often look at solving problems like a jigsaw puzzle. The first step is to create that external framework so that the other pieces can fall in place. Get the framework right, whatever is a problem. The framework represents 4 sides. The first side is determination. Never give up. Keep going and never give up. We don't know where the ray of light will come. The second side is support. We need the head for strategic thinking, hands for execution, and hearts for positive energy and empathy. Energy is not bound by geographical limits. Energy creates an aura even from a distance. The third side is effort. A genuine attempt to solve the problem. There must be focused, intelligent, and concentrated effort to find a solution. As the Dalai Lama said, without losing courage, sadness should transform determination. Don't feel helpless. Make that effort. And the last side, and most important of all, is the grace of the Lord. So using these values, ancient but very old and very important, knowledge, action, and care, they are like a lighthouse which guides us in a crisis, leveraging the power of partnerships, many hands working together to achieve scale and using innovation and technology to reach out to those who need it the most. In the end, we had many helpers and leveraged all the public-private partnerships. To summarize, tough times rarely last. Tough people do. Even small actions of compassion can make a difference. Every person can make an impact. Use determination, effort, support, and the grace of the Lord to make a difference to the world around you. To conclude with Mary Lou's beautiful poem, it applies to women everywhere. and the secret of how she leads in extraordinary times. Phenomenally, phenomenal woman. That's me, I say. It's a fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump around or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud, I say. It's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need of my care, because I'm a woman. Still I rise, just like the moon and the sun, the certainty of tides, just like the hope springing high. Still I'll rise, phenomenal woman. That's me. And that beautiful poem gives us a concept of always rising with certainty, just like the sun and the moon every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swati Perumal, for those inspiring words. And now we would like to invite Nistar Kasim, the editor of the Daily Financial Times, to moderate a Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swati. I think you took us through a journey of poetry, history. Amazing. Thank you so much. You're a renowned scientist and an industrialist. And then you didn't wait till you got to the top to make a change. I just want to know, did anyone empower you? I know you mentioned about the family faced lots of tragedies and challenges. Did someone empower you, or did you sort of inspire yourself? Which is like always, we talk about empowering women. I'd like to hear from you whether you, what was your case, say 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah, so I was 37 with two children, and I wanted to study more. So I applied to go to Harvard University to study public health. At that time, nobody left their children and went to a university to study. But I did it, and that was the support of the whole family. My in-laws, my sister-in-laws, my brother and his family, everybody helped me to look after my kids. And then I went to Harvard and I studied public health. I didn't know that 40 years later, I would still continue to do public health. And today, I'm able to use many of the things that they taught me, which impacts literally millions of lives across India. So I'm really grateful to knowledge, the Saraswati, the head of knowledge, which gives you so much inspiration to continue throughout your life.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open it to the audience because she's a very important person in terms of being inspired. Who would like to ask the first question from the audience?
Good evening, Dr. Swati. This question to you is coming from, as a woman of STEM, actually. So my question to you is, as a woman of STEM, how can we enable our future generations across social stratas to actually pursue their passions in STEM or pursue their passions in science? Because the reality is that in Sri Lanka, sometimes women don't pursue science because they don't see it as a lucrative career, or they might not have the adequate support that most of us are privileged to have. So my question is rather, how can we enable everybody across social stratas? What are the tools we can use to kind of get them into STEM and let them follow their passions? Thank you.
So recently I was invited to visit the International Space Station virtually, where I met with a great Japanese astronaut. And I asked him the same question that you're asking me. How do I get children to understand the universe and learn about science? And how do I inspire them to know more science? And I actually thought my grandchildren would join me for this International Space Odyssey. It was very fascinating to visit him and to hear his answer. And the one way he said was to encourage children to learn about the universe, to see the world, to see they travel much faster than we do. Even through the internet and even through their phones, they are so good. In minutes they can learn a computer. So to encourage them to expand their knowledge about the universe. And that really, attracts them to science. My 7-year-old grandson, after I went to the International Space Station, he said, I would like to visit that. And he saw all those buttons and everything, and he was fascinated. So I think these kind of explorations are a good start. The other thing is that the number of women, I started a project called the Marie Curie Project because she was a wonderful woman scientist. In my own research center, I had only 10% women and 90% men when I started. And then gradually, as I explained to them about merit, about giving them an equal opportunity, about making sure that all the computers were clean and devoid of bad language, I did all these little things. I made sure that they stayed, when they went home in the night, there was always somebody escorting them. And that made them feel so safe that 10 years later, I've now had 50% women in my R&D center. So sometimes women need to be looked after very well by the employers, those who are in STEM. And actually they pay quite well because STEM is not easy. You have to get a PhD and so on. So I think it starts with the children, encouraging them to know about science, and then later on, as you step into business, then it is really about employers respecting science.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Dr. Swati, my question to you is, first of all, I would like to thank you for the beautiful words you shared with knowledge, action, care, which was your key points. And you very rightly stated, tough times rarely last, tough people do. So on those lines, what are the most critical changes that we as women must make to face the future effectively?
Thank you. Whenever I talk to women across the world, particularly young women, I tell them about positivity. And I tell them about their own value in life, in the universe. Mother Teresa, you would think that she always was a person who cared for the whole world. But she used to say that I am a drop in the ocean. But if that ocean didn't have that drop, it would be impoverished. So every woman needs to have their own self-worth. They need to know that they're important and to always be positive. My mother used to say in Gujarati, D no depression tara vocabulary ma nathi, which meant that don't have the D of depression in your vocabulary. Always be positive, always be sunny-tempered, always be enthusiastic, and always be, going forward in life.
Thank you very much for those questions. One last question from the audience. I have few questions, Dr. Swati. In terms of, I know a lot of people want to sort of follow you. What would be your 3 key advice to young people, mid-career female managers in the corporate sector?
Yeah, so again, as I said in my talk, life is like a jigsaw puzzle. Who doesn't have problems? Who doesn't have ambitions? Who doesn't have aspirations? Who always wants to go upward, forward, and be successful? And I think using that framework, having always the determination, never give up, to always make that effort, and always employ support. Get support from your friends, family, co-workers, bosses, everybody to form this network. And then finally, use that, the universe, because the universe always rewards you for what you want. The secret of the universe is faith. And having those 4, I think, really help young people to go forward.
Thank you. You're also in the science and healthcare as well as industry. What is the need of the hour given the post-pandemic challenges, particularly from a South Asian context?
So I'm really active in what I call vaccine hesitancy. people are hesitant to take the vaccines. In my own country, where we make so many million vaccines, we've had now, 5 crore people taking vaccines. We've exported that many around the world, including Sri Lanka. People are hesitant because I think the media made so much noise about efficacy and all the wrong things which may happen, the clots and all kinds of things. But I want to reassure people that to make 50 million vaccines or making enough 300 million as India wants to make is not a trivial challenge. If you ask me to make it in my company just 300 million tablets tomorrow, it's very difficult. But because India has already been the vaccine capital of the world, they already supplied 60% of the vaccines to the rest of the world. And indeed, not just vaccine, they also supply medicines, generic medicines. In fact, we make some in Sri Lanka, and we also supply to many countries around the world, nearly 100. So when you do that, all those regulators come and see your plant. They see whether you've done it properly, they see whether your records are good. And so not to worry about the excellence in manufacturing, and therefore not to worry about vaccine hesitancy. And I think really one by one, pebble by pebble, I make 20 calls every morning. And I say to people, what are you worried about? Talk to me, tell me, and I'll tell you why I think that you should take the vaccine. People are afraid for their parents, people are afraid for their families, people are afraid for young people who may have had some other comorbidity. This morning I called my spiritual guru and I said, has anyone asked you to take the vaccine? And they said, well, nobody is bothered about us. And I said, no, I'm bothered because you give so much, so much help to people in need. You must take the vaccine. I will help you go over all these software issues and whatever, and we will, But people are so worried. I spend really 15, 20 minutes a day with each person telling them that vaccine hesitancy is not necessary at all. So I think that's the big challenge now, is to get everybody vaccinated whenever it's available.
Thank you. One last opportunity for the audience. Any follow-up questions from Dr. Swati? Okay. In the interest of time, I have one final question. I know you're an alumnus from Harvard. What does poetry teach other than textbooks, business, economic textbooks? And do you encourage corporate executives to read?
Yeah, actually, I'm a scientist. I didn't learn poetry in school. I mean, I did it in school, but then I went into the scientific field. What happens when you take STEM, then you do physics, chemistry, maths, and you forget about literature, history, and poetry. And actually, in the COVID lockdown, I was fortunate to study all those things. I made an effort to take history classes, I went to poetry classes. In fact, I'm doing one now, and Maya Angelou's poetry was in my class this week. And so, learning about the arts, I should like to share one last secret. Nitin Noria, who's the dean of the Harvard Business School, always told me that whenever you want to communicate an idea, use the arts. It gets so quickly to the heart of the audience. And using music, using poetry, using culture is a very good way to make people understand even complex scientific issues. So that's a little bit of a secret, but knowing the arts is certainly very important in communicating an idea, a concept.
Thank you very much. Excellent, very inspiring, I would say. Some key takeaways. And we value your time, and lots of secrets were shared, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate it. Thank you very much, Dr. Swati.
we are not afraid, although we know there's much to feel. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. Whoa, yeah. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to keep. Who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe? Somehow you will when you believe. In this time of fear, where prayer so often perusing, hope seems like a summer bird so swiftly flown away. Yet now I'm standing here, my heart's so full I can't explain. Speaking words and speaking words I never thought I'd say. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to keep. Oh, who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe? Somehow you will when you They don't always come when you ask, and it's easy to give in to your fears. But when you're blinded by your faith, can see the red through the rain. A small but still resilient voice say love is very near. A miracle. Though hope is frail, it's hard to keep. Who knows what miracles you can achieve?